So the Egyptians did use a form of plastic surgery for the dead. But why?
The Egyptians were terrified of death. It's hard to tell because, you look at mummification and you look at all the work that they put in their tombs. But really, they thought that the next life was supposed to be exactly like this one. And that's why they put all this work into it. It was because they loved life, not because they loved death. They feared death, but they thought if they took all of these measures, life would last forever. And that's why all the work went into it.
It's clear that the Egyptians knew the principles of plastic surgery because they used them when they prepared their dead. And as the Edwin Smith papyrus shows, they had the surgical skills to perform such operations on the living. But did they? There seems nothing about the mummies that proves that one way or the other. Natasha doesn't feel she can go any further here. What she can do is to switch to a new line of research, to go from beauty parlor to battlefield, to another civilization and the mightiest warrior ever. Horrible wounds forced Alexander the Great's surgeons to find new ways of keeping him and his men alive and on the march, techniques that opened the way for plastic surgery. Alexander's wars. As civilizations developed, wars in general became many times larger than ever before, and on ancient battlefields, thousands were either killed or wounded and left to rot. But it was the campaign of Alexander the Great that in the 4th century BC gave military surgeons new insights into anatomy and the nature of human skin, the basis of plastic surgery. This was because during the 10 years it took Alexander the Great to conquer most of the known world, he'd introduced surgeons to the battlefield. The Macedonian king's empire eventually stretched from Italy to India. It was the result of 50,000 intensively trained soldiers marching across Europe, Africa, and Asia, forcibly uniting the known world and reaping the wisdom of all civilization. Alexander saw each soldier as an expensive investment, and he protected his investments with dedicated medical teams. Alexander invented the field hospital, and it was the hospital doctors who helped lay the foundations of modern Western plastic surgery.
The plastic surgeon basically, I think, recognizes that they were born out of military surgeons. Plastic surgery is about basically operating on the skin, and the skin is the biggest organ in the body, so they're working with the skin in the arm, the face, and so on. They are dealing with the same tissues that the war surgeon deals with. War surgery always moves knowledge on in the field of medicine, not just in surgery, the whole of medicine. And that's been true since the beginning of time, and just as true in Alexander's day. The war surgeon's got nothing to lose. Faced with large numbers of wounded, there's no lawyers around. I don't mean to be glib, but if a guy's dying in front of you and there are some untried techniques that they've picked up by word of mouth, they're going to try them. Whether this is a better means of hemorrhage control, application of tourniquets, packing in wounds, whatever. Most of these will not have been thought about or gleaned in civil practice. They'll have come off the battlefield.
Alexander was a product of the Greek tradition of reason and scientific study. 200 years earlier, Hippocrates had separated medicine from magic and cults of healing and turned it into an empirical practice. From then on, doctors looked at the physical reality of illness and injury, rather than invoking the gods as cause and cure. So, just as rational thinking made Alexander's battlefield strategy a success, scientific battlefield surgeons kept his soldiers fighting fit. Alexander himself was wounded many times, but he always survived and never even lost a battle. As his victories accumulated, his men began to believe he was invincible. So did his enemies. But invincibility had nothing to do with it. His secret weapon was his surgeon, Demos. And Demos' greatest challenge came in India, near the end of Alexander's campaign. The king was hit in the chest by a barbed arrow. It was the most lethal kind of arrow and the hardest to remove. His men thought that this time he really was going to die. To illustrate Demos' problem, we gathered a team of experts. What kind of wound would be inflicted by the arrow that hit Alexander 23 centuries ago? And to deal with it, what techniques and tools did Demos have?
John, I'm very much in your hands here. This is your area of expertise. We have 4 arrow wounds. We don't know what's on the end of those arrows, but I suppose we'd have to assume that they're barbed.
Yes.
Ancient war wounds were specific to the weaponry of the time, and the surgeons had specific instruments for treating them.
So what the men were trained is when an arrow went in, was trained to snap it off and leave a piece sticking out. So when you turn up on the battlefield, use these. You know, the angle you're going in at. So if you try and pull it, and it doesn't come off, separate it. You go in, and as you pull down, you actually pump it, feel it.
Superb. And the barbs are covered. It's a very elegant piece of engineering, isn't it?
Yeah.
Beautiful.